Here's what I think of Master Temple of the Spider. Roll it. Welcome back to my humble little Neverwinter YouTube channel where we talk about rainbows, flowers, how to knit sweaters, and various other life hacks that will improve your life. You know, like how to lick windows properly. Nah, just kidding. This is all Neverwinter content. Also, quick shout out to all my channel members who decided to spend money on me. You see them on your screen right now. Every single one of you are awesome sauceness, and I appreciate you very much. If anybody watching this video feels left out and also wants to give me some of their monies, then just click join next to the sub button. I also have a Discord link and a merch link in the description if you are interested in joining my Discord or buying any of my wonderful merch. So, let's talk about the not so new Temple of the Spider, which is transforming into Master Temple of the Spider. And as we all know, that transformation is not really a transformation, but just a name change with a rework to the boss fights and an increased item level requirement and more difficulty. I mean, it isn't a new dungeon, and they never said they were adding a new dungeon. It is simply a rework of a dungeon we already had, which means it's not recycled. It's just the same old dungeon with a facelift. And to be completely honest, I'm okay with that, because for you old timers out there, if you all remember, we used to always complain and tell Cryptic they need to rework the old dungeons and bring them back new and improved. And that's exactly what they did with this Temple of the Spider, but also brought along with it an easier version of it as well, which is just like adding tiered dungeons if you have a normal version and a master version. I hope they continue this trend of reworking all the old dungeons and skirmishes and add 2 versions of each. An easier version with lower requirements that gives you gear and items that would help new players, and a harder version for the endgame players, which means by the end of all this reworking, if it were to be done, because nobody knows if this is their plan for the future, then that would mean more content for everyone. And I won't get into every little detail of how making a normal and harder version of each dungeon, skirmish, or trial can benefit Neverwinter, but what I can tell you are my thoughts on the Master Temple of the Spider, which was released on preview. As soon as it was released, many players flocked to preview as expected to test it out, including myself. I gathered my buddies, Northside, Mini-Me, Kim, Scotty, Real Suin, and a few others just to check it out. And as expected, there were not any huge visible changes to the Temple of the Spider dungeon. It was all basically the same with some minor changes to the graphics, but the main changes were only related to the 3 boss fights, which were completely reworked. And that's where the main focus was directed at, making better boss fights with better mechanics and way more fun and challenging to fight with. All 3 bosses are different, but they also don't have too many mechanics either. They're pretty simple to understand once you go through the dungeon a couple of times. The first boss has red circles placed under your feet that you have to move away, but make sure not to hit the barrels at the same time. There's a few mob spawns and spiders that you have to kill along with exploding barrels, and of course attacking the boss itself until he's dead. The second boss has red circles that spawn under your feet that you have to not overlap and move away in opposite directions. There's also ghosts that need to be healed by the healer, and some souls or mobs or whatever the fuck they are called that you have to kill really fast and attack the boss and kill him too. And then the third boss places you in a cocoon that your team has to break you out of. There's also beams that need to be intercepted, red circles to be avoided, and general red areas. And then, of course, kill the boss. I mean, there may be a few little things I forgot to mention, but that is the general gist of the changes. What makes this master dungeon harder to deal with is that the mobs actually hit harder and the bosses have more resistance, and mechanics are less forgiving than the previous version of this dungeon. It's just an overall different look to the boss fights and nothing more. It was super fun trying to figure this all out with my friends, but other than that, nothing crazy and incredibly impressive. And once we all get used to this master version, we'll be breezing through it as we always do, since dungeons always have the same repetitive mechanics to them. And once learned, there are no more surprises. It will become muscle memory in the long run. The only thing that will make the dungeon not completable by just any groups is the high item level requirements to join it and the more difficult boss fights. I mean, if your group isn't strong enough to complete it, you simply won't complete it. Even if you're at 70k item level to join in a private queue or 75k item level to join in a public queue. The whole dungeon is basically a DPS check and has DPS check mechanics in all boss fights. The first boss has the barrel mechanic, which you always must kill, or else it just adds stacks of DOTs that will give your healer a hard time and eventually kill you, or kill you all. The second boss fight has those souls or mobs, whatever they're called, that you also need to kill, or else you'll also get stacks of DOTs that will eventually kill you and your team as well. And the third boss has a cocoon, which if not broken out in time, you die, and you're out of the fight without any chance of being resurrected. Which is fine because we do need harder content for endgame, but also more content for new players as well. That's why I hope they continue with adding 2 versions of each dungeon that they add, including the ones that they rework. I mean, imagine every dungeon reworked has 70 to 75k item level requirements. And what the fuck would the new players do? Knit sweaters? Yeah, they don't want to knit sweaters. So my overall opinion of this new dungeon is that it's alright. It has some interesting mechanics. But in time, like every other dungeon, this dungeon will fall to the wayside. It's just the way it goes. Master Temple of the Spider doesn't have anything you really need either. I mean, really need to grind for. Since you can get by without any of the new rings, because outside of 2 or 3 of them, the rest are pretty bad. And we have substitutions in boss that are much easier to obtain, especially now with the crazy, insane high drop rates. I mean, I'm not saying don't run Master Temple of the Spider, because you should definitely try it, but personally I don't see any crazy incentives to run it on the regular, outside of titles and just for the sake of challenging yourself and getting completions. And sure, getting a couple of those rings would probably be okay too. I think the Vault of Stars has way more incentives than the current Master Temple of the Spider does on preview, but who knows what can happen between now and when they release it on live. A lot can change. We just don't know. But as it stands right now at this very moment, the rewards are very subpar for such a hard dungeon to complete. For me, endgame dungeons should have incredible loot, because if it doesn't, the eventual outcome will most definitely be the dungeon fading into obscurity. And they also brought in the same code, which means they brought in the same bugs. There's holes in the ground, the boss runs out of the boss fight and bites you at the campfire, all sorts of weird shit. So yeah, regardless of what happens and what changes they make and how they release it on live, it was a fun experience testing it on preview with Mini-Me, Northside, and a few other friends. So let me know in the comments if you tried it. What did you think of it if you did? Tell me your pros and cons and your overall opinion of Master Temple of the Spider. Seriously, I want to know how you feel about it. But for now, I gotta go. I gotta make more videos and do other things in my life. Anyways, Galactic here. Peace out. Stay safe.
Oh my God, if I die, I'm a legend.